Some mornings dawn with no hint of the storms they'll unleash, and that sun-drenched day in my garden was one such deception. My hands were buried in the rich, loamy soil, coaxing life into the delicate roots of my newly planted roses. The garden was my sanctuary, a place where I could escape the hollow ache of my husband Marcus's absence. For 5 years, his endless business trips had left me stranded in a marriage that felt more like a memory. At 62, I was still a vision, my silver-streaked hair cascading in soft waves, my figure honed by yoga, and a fierce refusal to let age dim my spark. "Clara, you look half your age," neighbors would marvel, but their compliments couldn't fill the void gnawing at my soul. Loneliness had become my shadow, and the garden my only lover. That morning, as I knelt among the blooms, a sharp pain lanced through my lower back, sudden and vicious. I gasped, dropping my trowel, the world tilting as I gripped the earth for balance. My breath hitched, the pain radiating like fire. I squeezed my eyes shut, willing it to pass, but it only tightened its grip. "Clara, you okay?" A voice broke through, warm and steady, laced with concern. It was Julian, my step-nephew, all of 24, with a presence that could steal the air from a room. Broad-shouldered, with tousled chestnut hair and eyes like storm clouds, he was the kind of man who turned heads without trying. He'd arrived unannounced, visiting for the weekend at Marcus's insistence, a rare gesture from a husband who barely remembered I existed. Julian's easy charm and quiet confidence had always unnerved me, though I'd never admitted it. Now, as he crouched beside me, his gaze fixed on me with an intensity that made my pulse quicken, I felt exposed in a way I hadn't in years. "My back," I managed, pointing to the source of my agony. I can't move." Julian's brow furrowed, his voice low and reassuring. "Let me help, Clara. I know a thing or two about muscle pain." His hands hovered near my shoulders, waiting for permission. I nodded, too desperate for relief to protest, though a flutter of unease stirred within me. His touch, when it came, was firm yet gentle, his fingers kneading the taut muscles with a skill that sent a shiver down my spine. The pain began to ebb, replaced by a warmth that spread like liquid fire, awakening parts of me I'd long buried. "Relax," he murmured, his breath brushing my ear as he worked. "You're too tense, Clara. You carry too much." His words were innocent, but the timbre of his voice, deep and intimate, stirred something dangerous. I exhaled, perhaps too deeply, my body betraying me with a soft sigh. His hands paused, and I felt his gaze, heavy and searching, though I dared not meet it. "Julian," I whispered, my voice trembling. It's helping." But it was more than help. His touch was a spark, igniting a hunger I'd forgotten I could feel. The garden, once my refuge, now felt like a stage where every glance, every brush of his fingers played out a forbidden dance. He leaned closer, his voice softer now. "This is bad, Clara. We can't fix it out here. Let's get you inside by the fire. The heat will do wonders, and I've got some liniment that'll work miracles." His concern was genuine, but there was an undercurrent, a flicker of something unspoken that made my heart race. I nodded, and he helped me to my feet, his strong hand steadying me as I rose. The way he held me, protective, almost possessive, sent a thrill through me I couldn't ignore. Inside, the living room glowed with the golden light of a crackling fire, the heat wrapping around me like a lover's embrace. Julian spread a soft blanket on the floor, gesturing for me to lie down. "You need to stretch out properly," he said, his eyes serious, but tinged with a warmth that made my breath catch. I complied, settling onto the blanket, the fire's glow dancing across my skin. Julian knelt beside me, warming a fragrant liniment between his palms. When his hands met my shoulders, I gasped, the sensation both soothing and electric. "Just relax," he urged, his voice a velvet caress. "Let me take care of you." But his touch was more than care. It was a revelation. Each stroke of his fingers unraveled years of loneliness, stirring desires I'd thought long dead. My thoughts blurred, caught between gratitude and a growing awareness of his proximity. His hands glided lower, tracing the curve of my spine, and I bit my lip to stifle a moan. "You're so tense, Clara," he said, his tone gentle but laced with something deeper. "You deserve more than this, more than being alone." His words pierced me, exposing the truth I'd buried. "The garden's my therapy," I murmured, trying to deflect. "It's all I need." Julian's hands stilled, his voice firm. "No, it's not. You need someone who sees you, who cares for you." His words hung in the air, heavy with meaning, and I felt the weight of his gaze, urging me to acknowledge what we both felt. The fire crackled, its heat mirrored by the tension building between us. Julian's hands resumed their work, slower now, more deliberate, each touch a question I wasn't ready to answer. My heart pounded, torn between the voice screaming that he was my step-nephew and the undeniable pull of his presence. The room grew stifling, sweat beading on my skin. Julian paused, wiping his brow, then tugged off his shirt in one fluid motion. His sun-kissed torso gleamed in the firelight, sculpted and breathtaking, like a statue come to life. "The fire's intense," he said, his tone casual, but his eyes locked onto mine, dark and unreadable. "You're overheating, Clara. That blouse is too much. You'll feel worse if you keep it on." His suggestion hung between us, daring me to cross a line. My throat tightened, words failing me. The heat, the pain, his nearness. It was too much. I nodded, barely perceptible, and Julian's hands reached for the hem of my blouse. His fingers brushed my skin, sending a jolt through me, and I shivered, not from cold but from the fire his touch ignited. He lifted the fabric gently, sliding it over my head, his movements careful but charged with intent. The air thickened, our breaths mingling as he set the blouse aside, his gaze lingering just a moment too long. "Better?" he asked, his voice low, almost a whisper. "I think so," I stammered, my voice betraying the storm within me. Better wasn't the word. Alive, desired, undone. Julian's presence was a drug, and I was already addicted. He gestured to the couch. "Let's move there. You'll be more comfortable." He offered his hand, and when our fingers intertwined, a spark shot through me, electric and undeniable. He guided me to the couch, his touch steady but laced with a tenderness that made my chest ache. We sat, close but not touching, the space between us a fragile barrier against the tension pulsing in the air. The fire's glow cast shadows across his face, highlighting the sharp lines of his jaw, the intensity in his eyes. "Clara," he said, his voice soft but resolute, "you don't have to be alone. Not anymore." His words were a lifeline, pulling me toward a truth I both craved and feared. I turned to him, our gazes locking, and the world shrank to the space between us. His hand reached for mine, his touch warm and deliberate, sending a shiver through me. His eyes flicked to my lips, and the air grew heavy, charged with possibility. "Julian," I whispered, my voice trembling with need. We shouldn't." But the words felt hollow, drowned by the heat of his gaze. He leaned closer, his breath warm against my skin, and I felt myself surrender. Our lips met, tentative at first, a brush of warmth that sent a shock wave through me. Then the kiss deepened, fierce and hungry, a release of every suppressed longing. His hands cupped my face, his touch both gentle and commanding, and I melted into him, my fingers tracing the hard planes of his shoulders. The world dissolved. There was only Julian, his warmth, his certainty, filling the void Marcus had left. When we pulled apart, breathless, our eyes locked, a silent agreement that this was no mistake. "Clara," he murmured, his voice raw. "I've wanted this, wanted you, for longer than I should admit." The confession broke me. "I want you too," I whispered, the words freeing a part of me I'd locked away. "I can't fight this anymore." The night unfolded in a haze of stolen moments, each touch a defiance of the boundaries we'd crossed. Julian's hands explored me with reverence, his whispers, a balm to my wounded soul. The firelight danced across our skin, and for the first time in years I felt whole, desired, alive. We lay tangled in each other's arms, the thin blanket barely covering us, the remnants of our clothes scattered across the floor, like evidence of our surrender. "Clara," Julian whispered, his fingers brushing my cheek. "I wouldn't trade this for anything." His smile was both tender and wicked, a promise of more. I turned to him, my heart full. "Thank you, Julian. I haven't felt this seen, this wanted in so long." My voice cracked with gratitude, and his eyes softened, reflecting the fire's glow. "You're breathtaking," he said, his voice low. "Not just your beauty, your spirit, your strength. You make me feel alive, Clara." His words etched themselves into my heart, a vow I wanted to believe. But the world beyond our cocoon was not so forgiving. Marcus was due back in 2 days, and with him came reality, a reality complicated by the arrival of Tessa, Julian's ex-girlfriend, who'd been texting him relentlessly since he'd ended things months ago. Unbeknownst to me, Tessa had seen us in the garden, her jealousy festering into a plan that would unravel everything. The next day, Julian and I stole glances and secret touches, each moment a spark reigniting our connection. But a shadow loomed. Tessa's messages grew more insistent, her tone laced with venom. Julian brushed it off, assuring me it was nothing, but I felt a chill I couldn't shake. That evening, as we sat by the fire, the doorbell shattered the quiet. Marcus wasn't due back yet, so who could it be? Julian's face paled as he checked his phone, a single message from Tessa glowing on the screen. "I'm here. We need to talk." My stomach twisted as I followed him to the door, the fire's warmth no match for the dread creeping over me. Tessa stood on the porch, her auburn hair wild, her eyes blazing with a mix of hurt and triumph. "Clara," she said, her voice dripping with mockery, "didn't expect to see you so cozy with Julian." Her gaze flicked to him, then back to me, a smirk curling her lips. "Marcus will love to hear about this." Julian stepped forward, his voice low and firm. "Tessa, leave. This is over. You don't get to dictate my life." But Tessa's laugh was cold, cutting. "Oh, I'm not here for you, Julian. I'm here to make sure Clara pays for stealing what's mine." She pulled out her phone, a photo of us in the garden, Julian's hands on my shoulders, our faces close, glaring on the screen. I wonder what Marcus will think of his perfect wife now. My heart plummeted, the world tilting beneath me. "Tessa, please," I said, my voice trembling. "You don't understand." I understand enough, she snapped, her eyes glinting with malice. You think you can play innocent? I've been watching you both, and I'm done staying silent. Julian's hand found mine, his grip steadying me. She's not yours to judge, Tessa. If you want to hurt someone, hurt me. Leave Clara out of this. But Tessa's smirk only widened. Oh, I'll hurt you both. Marcus deserves to know the truth. She turned to leave, her parting words a dagger. Enjoy your little fantasy while it lasts. The door slammed, and silence descended, broken only by the fire's crackle. Julian pulled me close, his arms a shield against the storm brewing outside. I won't let her destroy this, he vowed, his voice fierce. You're worth fighting for, Clara. But as I clung to him, Tessa's threat echoed in my mind. Marcus would be home soon, and with him, a reckoning. The forbidden flame we'd ignited burned brighter than ever, but at what cost? My heart raced, torn between the man who'd awakened me and the life I'd built, a life now teetering on the edge of ruin.